Issues seem to have taken yet another dramatic turn in Nigeria's major opposition party, the People's Democratic Party, following a fresh allegation against its embattled chairman, Senator Iyorchia Ayu, who, amidst call for his removal and replacement, has now been accused of bribing ranking members of the party's National Working Committee, purportedly to woo them towards retaining his position, which Rivers State Governor Nwese Wike is strongly against. This fresh fiasco is coming after the inauguration of PDP's Presidential Campaign Council, which had Wike and his cohorts visibly absent, even though they were drafted as members of the committee. Although the party has maintained that the crisis is a mere rabble-rouse, feelers are skeptical about the party going into the 2023 elections as a united house. Therefore, while we briefly discuss the unfolding drama in the PDP, Nigeria will be celebrating its 62nd years of independence tomorrow. Incidentally, this year's Independence Day celebration will be the last with President Muhammadu Buhari as Nigeria's president. So tonight, we will also appraise Nigeria's development, progression, trajectory, and how we got this far. Hello and welcome to Daily Politics on Trust TV. On this program, we discuss issues around politics, policy, and governance. I'm Hamza Idris. We are joined in the studio by Ode Friday. He is the Country Director of Accountability Lab Nigeria. We also hope to be joined by Professor Olisa Ozoelu. He is a development economist, and shortly he will be with us in the studio. Welcome,
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Tomorrow is independence.
Interesting.
But it's like most politicians are really on overdrive, going by what we said briefly, the crisis in the PDP. Maybe we'll discuss it briefly before What is your take?
Interestingly, I find this very interesting because of the way we have seen previously. If you have looked back, just to backtrack on what we had seen in the election in the political party primaries, we have seen political parties who have set up campaign forms at 100 million and so on and so forth. One thing I find interesting when that came up was nobody actually, Nigerians paid attention to that. But the government did not pay attention to that. I think INEC would have played a huge role to also manage those kind of concerns. But now what we are seeing playing is as a result of what has transpired over the years as a norm. So if you look at what has happened is from 100 million, money has been flying around and we have systems which are supposed to check these things, but we don't see them in effect. So I find it very interesting that at this point in time, we're talking about money flying around still, and money will still fly around because it's election campaign season. But this takes me back to what is the government doing about election financing. We as civil society organization, from what I represent, this is one of the concerns which we looked at. The president has also committed to free and fair elections back then in the Summit for Democracy in 2021 at the President Biden Summit for Democracy. I find it interesting, like these are some of the things you have to check at the Electoral Act to see that we have a fair system that gives equal opportunity to all of us. If we have money politics running through the system, how do we manage you and I getting into politics if we have to change the system? Which I find very disturbing at this moment. And one thing we need to check and find a way to solve those issues.
I was shocked yesterday. You know, it was towards the end of production in the newsroom when this story broke that some high-ranking members of the People's Democratic Party, they have returned humongous amount of money purportedly for housing. And I think some allowances. Were you equally shocked at the lab where you work?
Well, at the lab where I work, we're all about accountability. We're all about integrity. So sometimes you check at the system which we have put in place. I'll give you a small story about a friend who resides in Germany. He's also Nigerian. I'm not sure what the story is, but this is what he told me, like either 6,000 euro or 9,000 euro passed through his account. Okay. He has been under surveillance by the German government because the bank raised a red flag on his accounts. Not because it's Nigerian.
$6,000.
6,000 euros.
Okay, euros.
Not because it's Nigerian, but because there's a system which checks funds that comes in and goes out of your account. So for me, I find it very disturbing. Look at the amount of money flying through people's accounts. And somebody is saying, I did not know this money came through my account. I had to go and check. In our current day and time, you have SMS alerts, email alerts, which will prompt you when you have like a debit or credit on your account. You also have the NFIU, whose responsibility to the bank, the bank's responsibility to NFIU is to also alert them of this kind of transaction daily. And I think recently we had there's an act, I've forgotten the name of the act, but it deals with illicit financial flows. So more like money laundering. These acts are there, these processes are there, these platforms are there with government, but we don't see any actions from the government which backs all of this.
And I think even the EFCC, there is a threshold at which once certain amount, knock at the doors of your account, they're supposed to know. Exactly.
So this is the concern, which basically some of the values which we have to project. Nigeria is going to be 62. We need to set up a system and a society that serves us, all of us equal. I tell you, if 50 million enters my account, the bank will flag me down.
But I was surprised again, honestly, that one of a deputy national chairman from the South, he said it was while browsing through.
Exactly.
Now he saw that alert. Is it really true?
Because well, like I said earlier, we're in a time, we're in a digital system right now. Let's take, for instance, he's not our age. He's maybe above 60. He's not used to technology. We agree. But how do you say that kind of amount comes in through your account? My first question would be, what is the amount in your bank statement?
Yes, that's
so you don't even, such amount doesn't even move you anymore. So we need to start paying that. That's why I mentioned the NFIU. The bank have to do better around these things and ensure, like, once you have such amounts, you can flag it up and produce the necessary report to NFIU or even EFCC or even ICPC, who are there to check all these things. So we need to find a structure that works for all of us equally. Otherwise, like I say, I'm not sure what happens to my own account. If that kind of money comes to my account, I'm sure the next day you see EFCC at my door.
And maybe they have multiple accounts.
Exactly.
They don't even take note of some of the signals. And what is your take on the crisis in PDP? Because some are saying even the return of this money by high-ranking, about 6 of them or more, it was an afterthought, probably.
I'm not a politician, and I hope
you track them.
I track them, however, but it's already out there for Nigerians to see that politicians are very difficult people to manage, most especially when it comes to funding. And well, it's a track record to say most politicians, you don't know how they make their money except because they're in government or they have government contracts and all of that. So most of them leverage on these weaknesses to latch onto public mismanagement of funds. So for me, in terms of politics, I'm not a specialist, but I fear for this situation which has already been grounded as a process. With the PDP, it's really a big problem within their system. If Governor Wike had not mentioned earlier on about somebody receiving the chairman receiving some amount of money weeks ago, this whole thing wouldn't have come up. But yes, it's now out there for the public, but how do you engage? In our own space, it feels like there's a special protection for politicians in our field, because once you approach them, it feels they have, I'm not sure I want to start making comments on people who have been in EFCC nets and have been out of EFCC net because of corruption. So how do we talk about these things when the government that's supposed to manage these situations seem to not have a solution? But we as civil society organizations, once we monitor and raise these red flags, we expect some form of action. But sometimes you don't get that action as it's supposed to be. So it feels like politicians are a special class of people who rule at a higher level than you and I.
And, it's really the politics season, and as I said, the problem is really beyond PDP. When you look at it, almost all the political parties, they have one problem or the other, and we are approaching election. Instead of issue-based campaigns, they are now hurling insults and accusations against one another. Do you interact with the downtrodden, and what is their feelings as far as you're concerned?
I stand for underrepresented and underserved groups, mostly marginalized communities, PWDs, persons with disabilities, women and young people, which we also represent at our organization. And some of the feedback we have gotten in this situation, politicians are there for politics, which we clearly understand. But there's a thin line between politics and governance. Once you say you give all your promises and you say you want to do ABCD specified in your election campaign or your manifesto, then you get out there and you don't keep to your words. We find it as disturbing because the trust between the people and the politician, or the people and government, is broken. So we've seen that over the years, which makes it very disturbing for how we approach politicians and their approaches to governance, which is a thing of this disturbance. And one of the things we say is quite interesting, because once you try to engage with political parties, you don't engage with the right people. They don't have time. They always send you to their PA or somebody to always deal with. So sometimes it's always hard for us to also engage, but we still keep putting those platforms and making our demands known to them. At the lab as well, we coordinated and collaborated with a couple of other CSOs to make some demands, like declaration of assets is there in the code of conduct for you to declare your assets. So we feel like before even any politician, take for instance, you have somebody receiving 28 million without not knowing.
Another 30-something.
30-something.
And they call it housing.
And when you get into power or you get into governance, you don't declare those assets. So we don't even know where you start from or where you move from A to point B. So it becomes a concern when people say this person is worth 10 billion. How did you worth 10 billion by working for government or by becoming a politician? We need to start asking those questions and making sure people make those commitments on their declaration of assets to the public, so we know what you are worth before you even get in there. Then when you get there, we know how to manage your situation, but these things don't work that way. Another situation is, I'll probably just bring this up, which we have seen with the whole campaign strategy for everybody. Everybody keeps promising good roads, good schools, healthcare. I've not seen one politician or one political aspirant talking about accountability, which is just the basics. So if you don't talk about these things, how do we believe when you get into office, you will not mismanage our funds? So it's all complicated with politicians and the words they put out to Nigerian citizens on their promises and how we build trust. The social contract within citizens and the government has collapsed, and politicians as well.
Honestly, today I was so shocked with the tons of text messages we receive here from Nigerians, expressing disgust that people at certain level, the way they are sharing money among themselves, and then once there is a problem, they all, strip themselves naked in the market square, and still you see them the next day, sitting in one place and discussing as if nothing happened yesterday. Are you people worried with things like this?
I'm not saying this to talk down on people, but I feel people have short information span. And there's so much problem in the country where people also want to be happy. We just want to be happy people. We just want to have our daily bread. If some people are having 101, 011, that is their priority, to just be happy and have food to eat and try to be alive. So when you have this kind of issues, we find it disturbing that within the civil society space, like, we don't have citizens who are active in governance spaces. We don't have citizens who are active in politics. So it feels like it is not my business. However, it is your number one priority as a citizen of Nigeria to participate in governance. So how do you sit in one place and say it doesn't go? Something happens the next day, people just move on their normal life.
And as if nothing
for me, I feel we need to get to that space where citizens need to understand their rights, first of all, and they need to understand how to engage actively in governance and decision-making processes. There are opportunities for you to step into these offices, to ask questions. There are political parties for you to join and change the narrative. I know it's quite difficult at the moment because we run more like a money politics system, but you have to get in there. The first step is for you to get in there. We are talking about getting your PVCs, go out to vote and all of that, but you have to make that effort and get interested in your own life. The future of Nigeria is basically, like we say, is in our hands. But you don't just wake up in the morning and get on your normal business. One day, it's like a couple of people have said a couple of times, it will eventually get to your door. We talk about insecurity, we talk about poor healthcare system. It will eventually get to your door. Until it gets to you, before you are reawakened and understand this is what you're supposed to do. But I want to encourage every Nigerian out there, please get into politics, get active in governance processes.
Well, thank you very much on your take on the happenings in the major opposition party. Of course, our topic of discussion today is Nigeria at 62, where we are and how we got there. Mr. Ode, tomorrow is the D-Day. And do you have that feeling that today is eve of independence?
Well, interestingly, I always tell people this, my favorite lifestyle or engagement while I was growing up was the national anthem. Every time in school, I always look forward to the national anthem, how we also pledge to Nigeria, my country. But these days, you don't even have that kind of situation where people even have that commitment to even say the pledge or the national anthem. We have this, I think the government has also made this compulsory, the second stanza of the national anthem in most of their events. But it's just mere words as it is at the moment. We don't see that commitment like I used to see it when I was growing up. Because we had a country which everybody was looking forward to and looking up to. But tomorrow, Nigeria is going to be 62. For me, the only thing I said this earlier today, it's I'm always looking forward to a land where it says in the national, I think the national anthem, a country where peace and justice will reign. This is what it should be. This is what we should, the dream of Nigeria. But I'm not sure what tomorrow holds. Like, I'm not sure where the excitement is going to come, but, well, the green, white, green flag, we're going to get there.
Okay, well, we'll talk on the economy and many other issues, but let's hear from Nigerians.
It's self-explanatory now. It's what do you want to, there's no comparison between then and now. People are suffering. Don't even know why you want us to waste time. It's not discussable. Nigerians' economy then and now, even the 2-year-old child knows that it's fantastic. It used to be very fair, but now nothing is easy to come by now. We cannot buy anything that we used to buy in the market. People are suffering. Families, parents are dying. Children are crying.
The Nigerian's economic is visible. Everybody knows. Even the infants can testify to that. Even the Pampers that was sold 15 naira. It's now 150 naira, triple times the before. The economy is in shambles, it's deteriorating every day. Come to talk about insecurity, lack of job opportunity from the side of youths. That's what brought about insecurity in Nigeria. Inflation is at higher rates compared to 2015 when this government of APC, government of the civil people, by the people, they come and deceive us.
This morning I woke up and I saw 62nd. I was like, wow. So it's so, as in, it's already approached that we are already 62 and nothing we are really seeing. Especially the security matters in this country. Everybody is almost gone in the country. And I keep seeing the inflation on the what do you call it, the records of people remaining, 172 million people in Nigeria. I doubt if we are up to that.
Yes, Ode, you have heard them. Do you know the irony? We ask our reporters to carefully move around so that we get message of hope from the ordinary citizens. They couldn't get any. And that is why we are unable to have a clip of somebody saying, okay, there is hope tomorrow. Why do you think we come this far and this way?
This is a good question. I think for me, first thing on the table, in as much as we can make reference to inflation globally, basically, what we've seen in Ukraine and Russia has affected the world largely. These are some of the things we say people have to get interested in governance processes and decision-making processes. So if you look at that, it has largely affected the whole world. But bringing it back into Nigeria, I think some of the things that has, first of all, I would say some bad policies which we have put out there. Talk about what has happened with the Nigerian, the currency in itself. As of, I think it was yesterday or today.
720.
Yes, it was. I even saw 730.
At the parallel market.
At the parallel markets. I'm not sure what the policy says, but these are some of the things that should spring the government quickly into action to say we need to quickly address this. But it feels like it's just floating. We are just floating till whatever happens, right? Secondly, you see issue-based conversations around politics also spur up these things. I'm not sure how government oversees these issues, but we need to bring people to the table who have the right expertise. One of the things at the lab which we've identified is in democratic processes and even the election and campaign and everything that has to do with politics, we can't continue supporting people with questionable characters, characters of integrity to get into office. So for instance, you win elections tomorrow. I'll probably, as my friend, hire you as the CBN governor or the Minister of Finance. These things have its own implications, which we feel like translates to how these policies are being developed. So people need to spring into action. The parallel markets, we need to find a way to manage that. Otherwise, you find things getting difficult. Secondly, I think we have talked about fuel subsidy for so long, like for so long. The lack of transparency in our extractive industry has also caused us these problems of mismanagement of funds. Over the years, I was thinking a couple of days, I'm not sure which president has not been the Minister of Petroleum.
Yeah, maybe Yar'Adua.
Maybe Yar'Adua. So you have that.
I'm not sure
so you have that transition from one person to the other who doesn't even make the necessary changes that needs to happen in government. So, for instance, we have fuel subsidy. We know where we're supposed to head to. We know how money revenues are being generated in this country. How do we manage these resources is very paramount. Thirdly, if you look at the audit process in the government has released, I think, 2 or 3 audit reports over the years. I have a colleague who works in that space. And if you look at that report, you see a lot of things happening. How government pays about 200 million into a personal account is there for the records. But nobody talks about these things. So how do we manage mismanagement of public funds in our society? So we put it back into the society for you and I to benefit. We know things are getting difficult. We know inflation has gone to 20%. But somehow you have to manage these shocks with good policies around in our country.
You see, for us to really understand, I want you to go back memory lane, how the founding fathers, treated the subjects, their disposition to worldly things, and the institutions they established, setting the pace for a better Nigeria. But now you can see, we are not even talking about them.
The value system for Nigeria has gone down and is going down.
You talk about Sardauna,
you
talk about Nnamdi Azikiwe, you talk about Tafawa Balewa, you talk about Aminu Kano, you talk about Joseph Taka.
So my response to that also looks at what the society has turned into. I was having this conversation earlier on, just a few minutes ago. And one of the things I heard was corruption has been thriving in religious houses. Not just in the society, not just in government offices. So somebody gets a public government contract for 1 billion naira.
1 billion,
how you got that contract, you don't know. How you got the money to pay. In churches, you pay 10% tithes. Nobody's asking those questions on how you make money these days. So if I come tomorrow and I tell my wife I have 500 million, she'll be excited. But those things like the value system requires us to also ask questions. How did you make this money? Legal ways, illegal ways are there. We've seen these things on a daily basis. We see how procurement processes work just around the clock. Just around the clock. Like we talked about earlier on, somebody receives 30 million or 28 million from the bank. The bank doesn't raise a flag. I'm so sorry for the anti-corruption agencies like we've seen in recent times. It's very disturbing. Like most of their statistics have not shown they can act on corrupt practices or corrupt politicians. So you find a system which puts me and you under check but doesn't put politicians under check. But going back to your question, the value system needs to redefine these models from where we are coming from and where we are going to. So that's why we say 62 years. We have lost some values, we've lost some progress, but yes, how do we redefine our step? Is to begin to reimagine and rethink our value system, what Nigeria means. What the color green, what does the color green mean? What does the color white, what does it mean to you? But those days we had those foundations that we ground us even from the homes. But now you find out, I've moved out from my home. Most people have moved on from their houses where they get these values. They are now in the society. The society, what does the society teach us? Well, we need to redefine this value system and continue to build on what we had from our parents who created these standards for us.
I know in those days when we were young, a week or two to independence, you see us talking to our parents to get us new socks, new canvas, to get the flag in preparation to go into stadium in order to go, for the march past and all that. You meet with colleagues, you fraternize and all that. Do you think there is deliberate effort to actually make citizens forget about some of these values that we don't really see some of these things, maybe just in Abuja and maybe Kaduna or the major cities?
The major cities, this is what happens in most major cities. People just move on. Fast life, try to make money on the fast lane. Forget about your children. So you have situations where parents are looking for money and they leave the training of their children down to the schools. So when something happens, you don't really pay attention because you are chasing money, chasing a life out there. And until they bring to your notice what your child is doing or not doing, then you are like, oh, okay. Then you find out people try to bribe their way through, even in schools. For children who don't pass exam. You can't try that when we're growing up.
At all.
You can't just try that. But now you find all these systems in place where you abuse processes and systems. But I just feel like we need to rethink our value system and reimagine what we want for Nigeria in the next 10, 20 years.
Well, thank you, Ode, for your informed perspective. Viewers, we will take a short break, and when we return, the discussion continues. Please don't go away.
Trust TV, documenting the Nigerian story.
Welcome back. If you are just joining us, this is Daily Politics on Trust TV. Remember, you can follow the conversation on our various social platforms on Facebook, Instagram, and watch us live on YouTube. Mr. Ode, welcome back.
Thank you very much.
Yes, from Accountability Lab.
Yes.
In Nigeria. We are discussing Nigeria at 62, where we are, and how we got here. 62 years after, people are still talking about true federalism. As a journalist often, I still trying to find out what do we mean by true federalism 60 years after independence. Why this clamor?
Quite interesting, good question. I find it interesting that sometimes we bring this, should I call them titles, or slogans, or
nomenclatures.
Nomenclature just comes up from, last year I think we were hearing restructuring.
Yeah.
But I think Nigeria has come to that point where, like I mentioned, we need to have a rethink and reimagine what Nigeria looks like and act on it intentionally. It's a process which I think we're going through. If you check, sometimes the consolation prize for some of us is, if you check the US, if you check most countries in Europe, they are over 50, 100 years, and they've gone through that process. But it doesn't look like our process is leading us to true federalism. So if you find out you have more power centered around the federal capital, which is Abuja, but what people are clamoring for is, how do we leverage on the fact that for sustainability purpose and sustainability's sake, you need to find a way to devolve power also to the states, not just even power, but resources. So we can't have a Nigeria where NNPC generates revenue. At every point where you generate revenue, at every month, you have to send money to the states. But we found out that is not even working in its recent time. There's a report out there, I think for a couple of months, if not 1 or 2 thereabouts, NNPC have not been able to remit to the states because it feels like they don't have that money. But true federalism in its sense, for me, I feel it's a point where we have to think about the sustainability of states. If you look at back in a couple of years ago, when we were creating states, we didn't think about the result of what you are doing. Some states cannot generate revenue if they don't get NNPC funding or NNPC money. Yeah. So how do we think of that situation where power is equal to everybody, resources are there for everybody to also leverage on and work on? For me, I think that's what we think in terms of true federalism.
And I have this feeling that beyond the nomenclature, federalism, restructuring, you see, when you look at maybe FAC, this Federal Allocation Committee, or whatever, at the end of every month, you see the commissioners of finance and economic planning coming to Abuja. They will share money, whatever we're able to put in the biggest basket. Then they take it back to their homes. What do they really want? That, especially during election, you see them now talking about true federalism, true federalism. Is it that they want each and every state to now go its own way and start ruling itself, or what do they really want?
Well, for me, it's a good question, but I'm not sure I'm in the position of those states to know what they want. But from what I perceive, basically, is just how to create something that works for all of us. If you take a look at the Niger Delta region, one of the agitation is that they generate the oil, or they produce oil. And most of this funding, well, it comes back to most of the state government as 13% derivation. But some
apart
of them
from the commissions they have, you know, like in the Niger Delta, you have the Niger Delta.
Yeah, but it still doesn't feel enough for them. But the North says to us, we don't have that. So how do we begin to balance all of this? But yeah, for me, like I said, it's more like building an inclusive society beyond the people, where you have to put in consideration for all sort of persons, no matter your gender, your sex. We're talking about where states will feel part of Nigeria. Some people feel like, is our oil money, is our resources, you know. How do you create this balance? Otherwise, we'll keep having those challenges going forward.
Yeah, in 2021, the president was at the Summit for Democracy, right? And your lab was there. And he has made some commitments. Can you share some of them, and then how you've been tracking them? Because this is his final lap of, being the president of Nigeria.
Okay, yeah. The president, I think the 2021 President Biden had the opportunity to conduct the Summit for Democracy, and Nigeria was privileged to be invited. The president gave some commitments. So one of the things that happened at that summit was presidents giving verbal commitments and also written commitments. So it's more documented, like this is what it is. But I'll take you back to some of what has happened in the country.
Yeah.
We go for most of these international meetings, treaties, and make commitments but no action. The government for Nigeria has done a verbal commitment which looks at free and fair elections in terms of democracy, trying to improve insecurity, and a couple of others. But if you look back at what has happened, it's a verbal commitment. At the lab, we're saying to him, how do we make this actionable? It's a year of action. So the year of action is 2022, while the summit happened in 2021. Nothing has happened after that commitment has been made. But like I mentioned earlier on, a couple of other countries have put down pen on paper to say we are going to do ABCD and written clear, actionable points. But we are following up with the Nigerian government to say, you have made this commitment in terms of democracy, in terms of insecurity. I'm not sure the other two now. Okay. But we're saying...
Yeah, but even if you look at the insecurity,
yes.
how good are we so far?
Well, as good as what I think is how the role we have played in West Africa, which is very significant, but I think we still need more to coordinate with other West African countries. What has ravaged us over the years is coup militaries taking over. We have seen that in Mali, and Nigeria is playing a huge role to manage that situation. But when you take that back at home, one of the commitments with the president at the Summit for Democracy talks about insecurity which has caused us a lack of democracy.
Okay.
But we say at the lab that it is lack of democracy that has caused the insecurity. A democracy where you don't involve people in my village. They are not...
You decide for them.
You decide for them. So how do we reverse that? So when you find out some of these things around community down to the grassroots, their voices need to be heard. So when you make those commitments on their behalf and you are not consulting them, it's a big issue. So you find out some of them have just taken a pathway to say, we are not satisfied. Not because we want to cause problems in this country, but we are saying this is what we want, ABCD. So we need to go out there to also listen to what them and bring them to the table. For we at the lab, we are very big on inclusion. We say, if you are going to have a conversation or make decision on you and my behalf, for the 2023 budget, for instance, you have to consult me before you make out that budget to say, I need ABCD. We've seen that play out in the constituency project. Somebody imputes this empowerment initiative, imputes this constituency project without consulting you and I. You don't even know if I need a road in my community or water. But you put what you think is best for us. But no, those things don't work. So when you come back to my community, I'm not happy. I'm just expressing my not being happy to you in terms of insecurity. So you find most of these things translate to what we are having in the society now, which I think needs to be addressed in a more inclusive way of bringing people to the table.
But such conferences are becoming like a yearly ritual, because we are expecting another one, I think December, if I'm correct?
Yes.
Do you plan to hold those who made promises to account, maybe to remind them of some of these verbal promises they made?
We are strongly working towards that. Strongly, I use the word strongly working to that. The U.S. government, led by President Biden, has also made commitments to say there's the African Leaders Summit happening in December. As well as this year, the International Anti-Corruption Conference is happening in Washington, D.C. as well. So it's like a whole packed event where you have to hold people accountable. So we are going back there to say to the Nigerian government, some of these things, you leave your country, you don't commit to you and I. You don't tell me and you that we're going to do ABC, but you go to international scene to make those commitments. But we're going there with you to say, we want to engage with you. We need to have this conversation so we can bring them back home and hold you accountable to some of these commitments.
Yeah. And it is his final lap.
Yeah.
This will be his final independence anniversary as president. Based on your assessment, because you've been monitoring what he has been doing from 2015 to this moment, what is your take on the promises he made before he became president and what he was able to do?
First of all, I think I'm not impressed with those commitments. We had high hopes, not in political parties, not in individuals, but in the government arenas as of today. Because you have promised to, one of the key things, like I mentioned earlier on, it doesn't look like I've not heard any political or presidential aspirant talking about accountability as of today.
Oh my God.
As of today, we're not hearing you say you will do ABCD when it comes to integrity or trying to rebuild the value system of what we have lost to get us back to where Nigeria should be. So if you come in 2015 and 2019, 2011 as well, all of them have come and promised on different grounds, fighting corruption is the headline when we had in 2015 and 2019. Where are we? The former acting chairman for EFCC had a situation. We don't know where the situation is at the moment. Another thing was NDDC.
Some claim that really they couldn't find anything. And
but you should bring out to the public and make out the public statements for us to know. We don't even know the outcome of that. And I think recently he got a promotion. So we are also disturbed with some of those that's why we say
double standards.
Double standards, right? So you have another situation with the NDDC. The next thing we hear on national TV is for somebody to turn off off your mic. These are standards which we are putting out there for people to say you can do anything and get away with it. But these are unacceptable standards which we should frown at the situation in which we are. So going back to your question, in some of these promises made in 2015, 2019, 2011, I'm also not impressed on the progress of work being done for the current government. I think they needed to have done more. And unfortunately, it's less than how many months to leave office. I'm not sure what magic would happen between now and then to make any of those changes. But yeah, I think.
Now we have an array of candidates. Just yesterday, they signed a peace accord. But that was what they just did there. And as you rightly said, nobody was talking about
the signing of the peace accord was to
whatever, how to address inflation, what they will do about subsidy, and what do you think should be the agenda for some of these aspirants or candidates?
For me, strongly, like I mentioned previously, on your agenda number one, it should be declaration of assets to be made known. Like, you need to be that accountable and open to the people. I was just looking back at what had happened. I think I took note of the peace declaration meeting that happened. It says the first peace declaration.
Yeah, they are going to do another one.
They are still going to do another one. So we don't even know what that means, right?
Yeah.
Well, let's watch and see. But what I feel is on the agenda should be declaration of assets, which is number one. Number two, your agenda should reflect an inclusive government where you and I will be considered, like we don't need to be sitting in the seat of power, but we need to put a platform in place where we've talked about the Gender and Equal Opportunities Bill previously, which has failed to pass in the current assembly. We don't know if that is going to come out in the next assembly. But it's not about women. It's about you and I getting our voice. For instance, we talk about inclusion, basically, not being about women. We talk about gender, not about women. How do these issues affect you and I as young people and as women? We need to put this into consideration. So those kind of committee or declarations should also focus on these things, which will in turn affect the security of the nation. I feel these are some of the things, agitation that we face, that you miss out on. Once you miss out on these things, it just comes back to haunt you. So we need to find a way to put this as front burners on the agenda to see how we can move forward.
Yes, I want to ask you this question because today is eve of 62nd independence anniversary. Going by what the candidates present, it appears as if we are going back to this regional thing, because if you take some of the major candidates, already they are, attached to their regional affiliation. Do you think this is good for Nigeria at 62? I don't want to mention names, but obviously every other person knows that most of these candidates, they are coming under the banner of, where the terms of religion or ethnicity.
This is a very dicey topic, very, very dicey
But
topic.
it's very important because today is independence.
We can't rule out we can't just rule out 774 local governments. We can't rule out over 250 or 350 ethnic groups. So we have a strong diversity in Nigeria, which we need to work and find a way how it works for us. This is religious conversation, ethnic conversations are quite important, but I feel there's strength in our diversity, which we have not unlocked that strength in our diversity. So you find conversations and arguments around religion, around ethnicity, which basically for me, it's an important conversation, but at the moment, when you talk about excellence, you talk about accountability, you don't bring those conversations on the table.
Yeah.
So we need to find a way to balance this and see how this serves all of us equally. I also talked about inclusive governance. This is some other conversation around that. It doesn't matter who you are, but also pay attention to the situation we are in Nigeria. You have to be sensitive enough to understand these conversations will certainly aggravate issues, but how do you work it in the best interest of Nigerians to understand like there's strength in our diversity and build on this conversation over time to ensure that there's no division. I think while growing up as well, I'm going to live with you as my neighbor. It doesn't matter if you are Muslim or Christian and all of that, but now you find all those conversations trying to cause a divide within our system. We're going to be 62, we're still having those conversations. These are some of the things that I also will put on the table for those committees, for the peace committees to also focus on.
But are the politicians entirely at fault when you look at how we debase our values, how we debase, being truthful in whatever we do as Nigerians? Don't you think that the citizens also have a fair share of the decadence in the society?
I think the citizens have their role. That's why earlier on I talked about being an active citizen and responsible citizen as well. So if you go back to what has happened for every leader, you have to lead by example. So it's a leader that drives the conversation. For me, if I'm campaigning tomorrow to be president, I will have a team. And I have to imbibe my own culture in that team to ensure they live by that value which I represent. Otherwise, I feel it's a reflection of who the leader is. That's what is happening around citizens. But nevertheless, permit me to say this, we take back this to the media as well, who amplify some of these things, in as much as we need to kill those kind of conversations right from the word go. So if somebody starts that conversation, we don't need to amplify it. So you find on social media, you have influencers driving all of this. Well, I think Twitter is also doing a great job by putting some of those restrictions in place where you can report and flag down some of these things. But yes, we should try as much as possible to kill some of those conversations when they come out in public.
What should the citizens, the electorate, look forward to in 2023?
Like I said, for me, I go back to the national anthem and the national pledge. For me, I will look forward to a country where peace and justice will reign. There's nothing more than what we are seeing in the present times where I've had a couple of friends the recent thing you hear is people are jackbuying. So people are leaving the country because of some of these issues. But how do we ensure that there's peace and unity in our society? This is why I said it is a reflection of the leader who leads the political party or leads the country. You need to make intentional effort to drive these conversations and drive these reforms or drive these policies to reflect who you are and what you stand for.
Nigeria will be 62 tomorrow. Do you see it reaching 100, 200, 300 years as one nation, and how?
This is a brilliant question. Yes, I see Nigeria reaching 300 years. I pray I live to see that time. Yes, but the how is that intentional work which needs to be done by political parties, by leadership, by every aspirant, by even citizens. First of all, the first thing we do at the lab is we want you to be an active citizen. Second thing is we want leaders to be responsible. And the third thing, we want institutions, government institutions, private sector institutions, you and I, we want accountable institutions to be the foundation of what we stand for. So those three things, for me, is what will stand.
Well, thank you, Ode Friday, Country Director, Accountability Lab, for your informed perspective on Nigeria at 62, where we are and how we got here. Viewers, this is where we come to the end of today's edition of the program, hoping you enjoy it, and we hope that tomorrow you be with us for another edition of the program. Sadly, Professor Olisa Oswolu could not make it to the studio, but we hope to have him here some other time. Thank you very much. Happy Independence Anniversary. I am Hamza Idris.